December 1944. Germany was dying. In the east, the Red Army had reached the Reich's borders. In the west, Allied forces had breached the Siegfried Line and were threatening the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland. Hitler had one card left to play, a desperate gamble to repeat the Blitzkrieg success of 1940. He would strike through the Ardennes, split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, and force Britain and America to negotiate. Then he could turn all German forces east to face the Soviets. It was audacious, it was reckless, and it would be the final nail in Nazi Germany's coffin. This is the story of the Ardennes offensive, known to the Allies as the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler's last throw of the dice, the operation that squandered Germany's final reserves and guaranteed the Third Reich's destruction. By mid-September 1944, the Wehrmacht High Command was discussing a major counteroffensive against the Western Allies. American and British forces had slowed after crossing into Germany, unable to break through the Siegfried Line quickly. Hitler saw an opportunity. The target area, the sector between Monschau and Echternach in the Ardennes, the same forested region where Germany had launched its stunning 1940 breakthrough. German intelligence reported that Allied defenses there were weak, thinly held by inexperienced or exhausted American divisions. Hitler's plan was simple in concept, catastrophic in ambition. German forces would punch through the Ardennes, race to the Meuse River between Liège and Namur, then swing northwest to Brussels and Antwerp. This would cut off Allied supply lines, trap British and American forces north of the breakthrough, and recreate the disaster of Dunkirk. The operation would deploy 28 to 30 divisions, including 12 armored and motorized divisions. 2 panzer armies would deliver the main blow, supported by the 7th Army in the south. The original attack date, November 25th, later postponed to December 7th, then December 10th, and finally December 16th. Hitler consulted only the Wehrmacht High Command. He deliberately excluded local Western Front commanders until late September, when Field Marshals Rundstedt and Model were finally briefed. Both considered the plan wildly optimistic. They argued that 28 to 30 divisions couldn't possibly advance over 200 kilometers through enemy territory, especially in winter. Hitler ignored them. He demanded full implementation without modification. The operational assumptions were staggering in their unrealism. Goering claimed he could provide 3,000 aircraft for air support. Hitler scaled this down to 800. German planners calculated fuel reserves sufficient for only 140 to 160 kilometers of advance, meaning panzers would have to capture Allied fuel depots to continue. The attack depended on bad weather grounding Allied air power. It depended on surprise. It depended on American panic and collapse. It depended on miracles. German preparations were hampered by deteriorating conditions. Allied pressure around Aachen forced the Wehrmacht to commit reserves that should have been saved for the offensive. Fuel shortages worsened. Training time for new divisions was inadequate. Still, the Germans achieved remarkable operational security. New divisions were formed. Veteran units were quietly rebuilt. Troop movements occurred at night. Radio discipline was strict. The Allies suspected nothing major. By December 16th, Germany had assembled roughly 900 tanks and assault guns in the Ardennes sector. Fuel stocks remained critically low. Around 800 aircraft were available for support, a fraction of Allied air strength, but potentially effective if weather kept enemy planes grounded. Hitler also authorized special operations. Otto Skorzeny, the commando who had rescued Mussolini, organized Panzer Brigade 150, German soldiers in captured American uniforms driving captured American vehicles. Their mission? Penetrate Allied lines, create chaos, misdirect traffic, destroy supply dumps, and spread panic. On paper, it was a bold plan. In reality, it was desperation dressed up as strategy. By December 1944, the Allies had 63 divisions in Western Europe, including about 40 American divisions. They fielded an estimated 10,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, supported by thousands of aircraft. The main American strength was concentrated around Aachen and southward. The 8th Corps defended a 115-kilometer stretch in the Ardennes with only 4 divisions, some under strength, many composed of green troops or units resting after heavy fighting. American intelligence had detected some German buildup, but dismissed it as defensive positioning. No one expected a major offensive through the Ardennes in winter. The terrain was difficult, the weather was miserable, and Germany, everyone assumed, no longer had the strength for grand offensives. They were half right. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16, 1944, German artillery opened fire along an 80-kilometer front. The barrage lasted 90 minutes. Then infantry and armor surged forward through snow and fog. American forces were caught completely off guard. Communications broke down. Units lost contact with headquarters. In some sectors, panic spread as German tanks appeared out of the mist. The German attack deployed 3 armies: the 6th SS Panzer Army under Sepp Dietrich in the north, the 5th Panzer Army under General von Manteuffel in the center, and the 7th Army covering the southern flank. In the first 24 hours, the offensive achieved significant gains. The 5th Panzer Army broke through American lines and advanced nearly 20 kilometers. The 6th SS Panzer Army pushed forward, though more slowly. Some American units retreated in disorder, others held stubbornly, buying time. Skorzeny's commandos infiltrated Allied lines, creating confusion. Some changed road signs, others spread false rumors. The psychological effect was disproportionate to their actual achievements. Rear area troops became paranoid about German infiltrators, slowing movement and response. But by December 17th, serious problems emerged. The 6th SS Panzer Army was bogging down. Fuel shortages hit hard. American resistance stiffened faster than expected. The critical town of Bastogne, a road junction vital to the German advance, was surrounded by the 5th Panzer Army, but couldn't be captured. American paratroopers and armored units rushed to defend it. A German airborne drop near Malmedy around December 17th failed completely. Paratroopers landed scattered and disorganized. They never assembled enough strength to accomplish their objectives. By the evening of December 16th, Allied commanders grasped the scale of the threat. Supreme Commander Eisenhower immediately ordered reinforcements from other sectors. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions raced to the Ardennes. Patton's Third Army began a dramatic wheeling movement northward to strike the German southern flank. Most critically, the weather began to clear. On December 23rd, Allied air power returned in force. Fighter bombers strafed German columns. Heavy bombers hit supply routes and bridges. The Luftwaffe's 800 aircraft were hopelessly outnumbered. German fuel stocks evaporated. Panzer columns ground to a halt, literally out of gas. Crews abandoned tanks that couldn't be moved or defended. By December 24th to 26th, the offensive had clearly failed. The 5th Panzer Army's deepest penetration reached about 100 kilometers, halfway to the Meuse, nowhere near Antwerp. Bastogne held. The 6th SS Panzer Army was stalled. The 7th Army had accomplished nothing on the southern flank. Hitler's headquarters acknowledged that reaching Antwerp and encircling Allied forces was impossible. The decision was made to halt the offensive and transition to defensive operations. The German advance, the brief window when breakthrough seemed possible, had lasted barely 10 days. By late December, the Battle of the Bulge had reached its turning point. German casualties totaled roughly 90,000 by most estimates, killed, wounded, or captured. Hundreds of tanks were lost. The Luftwaffe suffered crippling aircraft losses it could never replace. Allied casualties were also severe. Estimates range from 75,000 to 89,000, mostly American forces. But unlike Germany, the Allies could replace losses. American factories were producing tanks faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy them. Hitler had gambled everything on the Ardennes. He committed Germany's last strategic reserves, divisions, tanks, fuel, and aircraft that could never be replaced. He did this at the moment when the Red Army was preparing a massive winter offensive in the east. The results were catastrophic. When Stalin launched the Vistula-Oder offensive on January 12, 1945, the Wehrmacht had no reserves left to stop it. The 6th SS Panzer Army and other units had to be frantically withdrawn from the west and sent east, arriving too late and too weak to make a difference. Hitler's fantasy of splitting the Western Allies from the Soviets never materialized. Instead, the offensive strengthened Allied unity. Churchill and Roosevelt explicitly coordinated with Stalin, who accelerated his offensive to relieve pressure on Western forces. The Ardennes offensive didn't delay Germany's defeat, it accelerated it. The Battle of the Bulge proved what many already knew. Germany had lost the war, not just tactically or operationally, but in every meaningful sense. Hitler had tried to recreate 1940, but 1940 was gone. Germany in 1944 wasn't the blitzkrieg juggernaut that had crushed France. It was an exhausted, resource-starved military running on fumes and delusion. The Wehrmacht had skilled commanders, tough soldiers, and capable equipment. What it didn't have was fuel, replacements, air cover, or strategic depth. It couldn't absorb losses, it couldn't sustain offensives, it couldn't win. The Ardennes offensive was Hitler's last gamble. He bet everything. He lost everything. The German advance, the brief moment when victory seemed possible, lasted barely 10 days. The consequences lasted forever. It was, in the truest sense, a suicide mission. Not just for the roughly 90,000 Germans who became casualties in the Ardennes, but for the Reich itself. Hitler wanted one more blitzkrieg. Instead, he got his regime's death certificate.